This is a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell, and we are coming on the air as we are about to hear from Vice President Kamala Harris. See her now walking to the stage. She had hoped to become the country's first female president by delivering a victory speech at her alma mater. Now that is a speech of defeat, coming just 12 hours after Donald Trump declared victory. Trump cruised to a resounding victory over Harris. They had to have spoken on the phone. We are told that the vice president conceding and that it was a conciliatory call. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. So let me say, and I love you back. And I love you back. So let me say, my heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. To my beloved Doug and our family, I love you so very much. To President Biden and Dr. Biden, thank you for your faith and support. To Governor Walz and the Walz family, I know your service to our nation will continue. And to my extraordinary team, to the volunteers who gave so much of themselves, to the poll workers and the local election officials, I thank you all. Look, I am so proud of the race we ran and the way we ran it, Over the 107 days of this campaign, we have been intentional about building community and building coalitions, bringing people together from every walk of life and background, united by love of country with enthusiasm and joy in our fight for America's future. And we did it with the knowledge that we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power. A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny. And anyone who seeks the public trust must honor it. At the same time, in our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. and loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation, the ideals that reflect America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up. I will never give up the fight for a future where Americans can pursue their dreams, ambitions, and aspirations, where the women of America have the freedom to make decisions about their own body and not have their government telling them what to do. We will never give up the fight to protect our schools and our streets from gun violence. And America, we will never give up the fight for our democracy, for the rule of law, for equal justice, and for the sacred idea that every one of us, no matter who we are or where we start out, has certain fundamental rights and freedoms that must be respected and upheld. And we will continue to wage this fight in the voting booth, in the courts, and in the public square. And we will also wage it in quieter ways, in how we live our lives, by treating one another with kindness and respect, by looking in the face of a stranger and seeing a neighbor, by always using our strength to lift people up, to fight for the dignity that all people deserve. The fight for our freedom will take hard work, but like I always say, we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work. And the fight for our country is always worth it. It is always worth it. To the young people who are watching, it is... I love you. To the young people who are watching, it is okay to feel sad and disappointed, but please know it's going to be okay. On the campaign, I would often say, when we fight, we win. But here's the thing. Sometimes the fight takes a while. That doesn't mean we won't win. That doesn't mean we won't win. The important thing is don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Don't ever stop trying to make the world a better place. You have power. You have power. And don't you ever listen when anyone tells you something is impossible because it has never been done before. You have the capacity to do extraordinary good in the world. And so to everyone who is watching, do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together. Look, many of you know I started out as a prosecutor, and throughout my career, I saw people at some of the worst times in their lives. People who had suffered great harm and great pain, and yet found within themselves the strength and the courage and the resolve to take the stand, to take a stand, to fight for justice, to fight for themselves, to fight for others. So let their courage be our inspiration. Let their determination be our charge. And I'll close with this. There's an adage an historian once called a law of history, true of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all, I hope that is not the case. But here's the thing, America, if it is, let us fill the sky with the light of a brilliant, brilliant billion of stars. The light of optimism, of faith, of truth, and service. HU. And may that work guide us, even in the face of setbacks, toward the extraordinary promise of the United States of America. I thank you all. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. I thank you all.
The first woman to become Vice President of the United States, who had hoped to crack the glass ceiling and become the 47th president, just now conceding at Howard University, her alma mater, beginning by saying, "My heart is full today, full of gratitude, full of resolve," but at the same time saying the light of America's promise will always burn bright as long as we never give up and as long as we keep fighting. You can see the vice president there, joined by her husband, Doug Emhoff. Want to bring in Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes, who's there at Howard University and has covered this campaign. And we hear once again Beyonce's Freedom in the background there. What else did we hear from the vice president just now, Nancy?
Well, Nora, we heard from this vice president an acknowledgement of the way that many of her supporters are feeling right now, which is that the United States is entering a dark time. She said, if we're going to be entering that dark time, let's be a billion points of light. Let's commit ourselves to service. Let's commit ourselves to acts of kindness. Let's find some good in the situation we now find ourselves in. And I have to tell you that what was striking here on the campus of Howard University, this crowd is filled not just with supporters, but with Howard students, many of whom were not invited in for what was supposed to be a victory party here last night, but were allowed to come and stand here in the yard and watch this speech today. And so to see the tears in the eyes of those students, some of whom were casting ballots for the very first time, some of whom believed that they were casting a vote for the woman who could be the first graduate of an HBCU to actually become president of the United States. To see the tears in their eyes today was really moving and really sobering. The vice president said that she had spoken to former President Trump this afternoon, and that she talked about the importance of unity. And actually, the former president put out a statement acknowledging that and extending a rare olive branch to her and complimenting her on the tenacious race that she ran over the past 107 days, Nora.
And Nancy, we also heard from Vice President's campaign manager with a similar theme that we just heard from the Vice President. While she said, "While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fuels this." What's behind that continued fight?
Well, that memo that you're referring to from the campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, thanked campaign aides and volunteers, but it ended with a very pointed phrase, Nora, and I'll just read it to you. She said that the work of protecting Americans from the impacts of a Trump presidency starts now. And basically, that was a call to arms for Kamala Harris supporters, for Democrats more broadly. We may have won this fight, but there are more fights to come. They're very concerned about what Trump might try to do when it comes to health care, when it comes to mass deportations. And they recognize that there are more fights to come, fights that are only going to become more difficult for Democrats as they lose control of the Senate and are poised to potentially stay in the minority in the House as well, giving Republicans a trifecta of the White House, the House, and the Senate.
Nancy Cortez, thank you. I want to bring in Robert Costa to talk about Donald Trump, who with a populist revolt has won a decisive victory, not only perhaps in the Electoral College, but the popular vote as well. Some are calling this the biggest shift to the right in our country since Ronald Reagan's victory in 1980. What are you hearing from the Trump team today? His spokesman offered a conciliatory note to the vice president, but what happens next?
Well, the Trump campaign was certainly populist in spirit. They're confronting now in Vice President Harris an opponent who has conceded this election, and I've covered her since she was in the U.S. Senate. And when I speak to her confidants and her friends, I say, who is she? What is she about? And they say she is a lawyer. At the end of the day, she believes in the rule of law, in constitutional order. And you see in her tone and her speech today, not some kind of populist fervor. Yes, she talked about galvanizing Democrats and moving forward with their head held high. But you see someone who's steady, committed to the peaceful transfer of power, urging all Americans to accept the election results. And when I talk to the Trump campaign, they don't see in Vice President Harris someone they want to fight. They see someone to a point in terms of her constitutional office, someone to be respected. Now, how they handle her in the coming days, how they handle President Biden, who knows? But she is projecting herself today as a serious figure on the American scene and how she's handling this devastating defeat with this speech. And it will be very intriguing to me as a reporter to watch how will the Trump campaign handle her showing grace in this moment. Will they pull back some of their usual political attacks?
Well, if the last 3 months are any guide, I imagine that we'll quickly go back to some of the very personal ad hominem attacks that characterized this race. As you know, Donald Trump had called her low IQ, and there were lots of back and forth between the two of them. I want to ask you, John Dickerson, because you spent a lot of the evening taking a look at the exit polls, and I think people want to know, what does this say about America? This is now Trump's America for some people. In the last 11 of 13 elections, people have voted for change. The exit polls show 73% of voters thought that Trump was more likely to bring about change.
Yeah. Can I just do one quick remark on what Harris said? A couple of things. One, it's not a throwaway line when she says we must accept the results of this election. That would be in normal traditional American politics, just something you say, you move on. It got applause. She lingered on it. That's obviously still making those distinctions with Donald Trump. And there was also some self-help in here. We wage this campaign in quieter ways, in the ways we treat each other as individuals. That's also implicit in that as a criticism of Donald Trump. It felt very much like Ted Kennedy's speech at the 1980 convention when he lost, which is the hope still lives and the dream shall never die, which is a kind of formula for a Democratic concession speech, giving everybody something to fight for in the future. What this election was about, to your question in the exit polls, it was an election that changed. Donald Trump was able to appeal to parts of what were the traditional Democratic coalition by making a case about the economy, particularly to people at the lower end of the economic scale. But so what Democrats used to think were ironclad separations on race, he broke through those with Latino voters. He didn't do it so much with black voters. And he was able to hold on to his own voters. Kamala Harris, by contrast, was not able to do as well with women voters as she had hoped. And I think at the end of the day, what Donald Trump's success and the success of other Republican candidates up and down the line is that there was a group of voters out there who felt unseen, unheard during the economic crisis, but also when you listen to J.D. Vance's speech at the convention, they felt unheard and unseen going back to the financial crisis of 2007, 2009, and back to the wars after 9/11. And we should throw COVID in there, too. And so that's, and here we have the exit polls showing how it actually happened. There you see the victory among Latino voters. Donald Trump doing better than in 2020. He did well with young voters, this is the Democratic coalition. Most important number there is at the bottom. Women, 53% turned out for Kamala Harris. It was 57 for Joe Biden, and that's really the most important part of the race, that not turning out those women as part of her coalition.
I want to bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns. She is with the president-elect Donald Trump in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Caitlin, what are we hearing about potential presidential transition plans?
Yeah, that's right, Nora. This team is already getting to work, working on that transition. Just the former president and president-elect now is just a couple of miles away from here at his resort in Mar-a-Lago. Today, he has been taking calls from world leaders. He had a 25-minute phone call with French President Emmanuel Macron, and they talked about a lot of different issues according to the readout. And most importantly, of course, the issue of Ukraine will be center stage of some of those key relationships with foreign leaders. In terms of the transition, it's notable that Trump's two sons, Don Jr. and Eric Trump, are among those leading this transition team. This has been a family affair, this campaign, from the beginning, and will continue to be through the transition. Also leading that transition is Linda McMahon, the former CEO of WWE Wrestling, and also served as the in his cabinet before, and Howard Lutnick, who is a close friend of Trump and a former CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, leading that transition. But Nora, we're really looking at not only all the jobs that have to be filled, but specifically his cabinet. He's mused about a role for RFK Jr. as someone who could be involved in health policy, for example. But remember, all of the criticisms that came for Donald Trump from former members of his cabinet in his administration were kind of key centerpiece, center stage of this campaign. So he has noted that he will pick people differently than he has before. So keeping an eye on that. But this is a team getting prepared to go to Washington. And also, as Donald Trump mentioned in his acceptance speech last night, feeling like they have a mandate for governing. Not only their defeat in the Electoral College, they're also on track for a narrow win in the popular vote. And they're also going to come to Washington with a Senate majority, and we're keeping an eye on the House majority as well. So this is a former president, now president-elect, feeling like he has a mandate and broad Republican support in Congress. Nora.
Excellent reporting there, Caitlin Huey-Burns in West Palm Beach. Want to turn to our senior White House and political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe. And that is an important point, that he will see this election as a mandate. It was a resounding victory for him. And then he will have that majority in the Senate. So he will have some leeway about who he puts in his cabinet.
Not only who he puts in his cabinet, but potentially who he can stack the Supreme Court with. Should some of the older justices decide to retire, can fill the federal judiciary as well across the country, the appeals and district court level. It gives him almost total control of the federal government, and especially its personnel. There's a few things going on in Washington and across the country we should reflect on. First of all, we know now at the Justice Department there are active discussions about starting to wind down some of those investigations and the cases involving him. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor's office, in discussions with the Attorney General about winding down the election-related allegations. The classified documents case was already dismissed. We'll see if they can do that by the inauguration. The other thing we've picked up on today, Democratic governors across the country in big blue states, Midwestern, Southwestern states, many of whom have experience working with the first Trump administration during the pandemic, are in active discussions today about how to, as they put it, Trump-proof their states and prepare for big changes, ongoing changes in women's reproductive health, immigration policy, environmental regulations, and how the federal government will regulate industry and other aspects of society. These are governors like Illinois' J.B. Pritzker, Colorado's Jared Polis, Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, who were all in those meetings with him back in the day about the pandemic, and then had to band together to deal with some of the relief because they believed the federal government wasn't moving fast enough. The other thing, if you were hearing that speech and you thought to yourself, that kind of sounds like the beginning of a 2028 campaign, some Democrats I've already heard from say, yeah, that did sound a little bit like that. But they said, there'll be at least 20 other Democrats who want to run as well. She will not have the field to herself if she so chooses to go down that road in 4 years.
That's right. The Vice President Kamala Harris conceding the race, she said today, but not the fight. Donald Trump, in his remarks last night, calling the MAGA movement the greatest political movement of all time and saying that he will bring about the golden age of America. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7, your local news. And then tonight, we'll have a full wrap-up on the CBS Evening News. We've got an hour-long show tonight, so we hope you'll join us. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Norah O'Donnell.